Good morning, colleagues. Sanbonani, Molweni, Dumelang, and congratulations on making it through a cold, wet, and physically isolated winter. I hope you're adjusting to the spring weather and the country's transition to lockdown level 1. Some of you have started returning to work on campus, while others are continuing to work remotely. No matter where you are, I want you to know how important your work has been to keeping the University of Cape Town operational this year. We could not have made it this far without every individual doing what they could to keep the academic project going forward. This includes the hard work of staff in our faculties, the many colleagues in our support and administrative departments, and those staff who continue to provide essential services during the different stages of lockdown. Thank you for your commitment and your flexibility. COVID-19 has been an unwelcome and difficult surprise for all of us, but it has also revealed how adaptable, innovative, and resilient you are. The classic paradox of the human condition is that when we face our greatest challenges, we also discover our greatest ingenuity. I've been very impressed and so grateful for the ways you have found to support UCT and each other during this time. This gives me confidence in your ability to persevere to the end of the academic year 2020. As you know, this academic year will need to run into 2021. Much of the work will continue to be online and under conditions that are still new to us. The expectation from health experts around the world is that next year we will have to remain on guard against spreading the infection. This means that you and I must help each other and our loved ones and our colleagues and students to continue to wear face masks in public, keep a distance of 1.5 meters from each other, and remember to wash or sanitize our hands regularly. We can succeed if each individual does their part. COVID-19 is a human tragedy that has hit some of us very personally through dearly loved family members, friends, and colleagues. Behind every statistic is a person whose loss is felt with deep sadness. Our COO, Dr. Reno Mora, will update us on the latest COVID-19 statistics. It grieves me to report that 9 colleagues and 1 student so far have passed on as a result of the pandemic. As a university, we must never forget the human toll it is taking on the UCT community. We need to find a way to acknowledge those we have lost, to honor their lives and what they mean to us, and to help teach future generations about this chapter in our history. But future generations should also learn how this tragedy brought out the best in us, the bonds of solidarity that we forged, the compassion we displayed, the humanity we extended to all, and the sacrifices that we were prepared to make in the service of the greater good. And these sacrifices include the hard work of creating and managing the emergency remote learning program, supporting students and staff remotely since the second term, including the provision of counseling resources and other work that UCT Human Resources has done to address the new challenges of COVID-19 as presented, and which Dr. Mora will discuss later. But also supporting worldwide research into COVID-19 with our own investigations into developing vaccine candidates and potential tests of immunity, epidemiology studies, drug trials, and the development of low-cost personal protective equipment. Advising the government at provincial and national level on the pandemic's implications for health, higher education, human settlements, science and technology, social development, small business development, and trade and industry, among others. UCT joint staff with the Provincial Department of Health and the National Health Laboratory Service have been working in local hospitals and clinics and running weekly webinars for healthcare professionals to provide updates on the local outbreak and expert presentations on managing COVID-19 and results coming out of research studies. I want to make special mention of the many colleagues across campus who have been working very hard to help people cope during the lockdown and to prepare our facilities for the safest possible phased return to campus. This has been a concerted effort involving all faculties, most of our past departments, coordinated by Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Mora, with assistance from Dr. David Kutsier of the Health Sciences Faculty and Mr. Brent Proctor of the Properties and Services Departments. Thank you very much, colleagues. But now, for most of you, by now, most of you will be aware that we have plans in place to complete our academic year in the best possible way under the circumstances. Our guiding principles for this task include the following: equity and fairness, protecting the most vulnerable among us, and employment security for as many of our colleagues as possible. We know this is a concern as we anticipate a very tight budget over the next few years. Perhaps not just for UCT, but generally for the higher education sector. Things are going to be tough financially. But we, as a university leadership, are committed to job security and ensuring the health and safety of our university community to the best of our abilities. And we request your cooperation with us in this endeavor. UCT's plans for teaching and learning, research, the return of some staff and students, the reopening of some of our residences, and restoring some of our face-to-face professional services have been developed in line with these guiding principles and are set out in communications issued by the DVCs and the Chief Operating Officers who are here today, and they will be addressing you in the different areas that they're leading. Dr. Mora, Professor Ferris and Harrison, as well as Associate Professor Leslange, will be giving you some details of these plans in this meeting. At the same time, we have been continuing the critical work of running the university on principles of good governance, including our commitment to transforming the institution. The COVID-19 UCT Emergency Fund, which is administered by the Development and Alumni Department, has raised almost 8.6 million rands, including donations from individual staff members. I have to say thank you to Dr. Russell Ellie, as well as his colleagues in the Development and Alumni Office for leading this endeavor and pushing forward to recruit as much donation as possible. Thank you very much also to all of you who donated a percentage of your salaries to the fund. UCT's University Finance Committee has allocated an initial amount of 30 million rands towards our expected total increase in costs. And the Department of Higher Education and Training has also approved the reallocation of government funding to support the additional costs incurred by COVID-19. So far, we've disbursed in excess of 36 million rands from this grant as a result of some of the direct costs of COVID-19 to the university. These additional costs include UCT's support of students from disadvantaged homes and communities, such as transport for students who needed it to get home ahead of the lockdown, surveying every student online or by phone about their capacity to study remotely, providing laptops on loan and delivering them across the country, delivering teaching materials on flash drives or paper format to students who do not have online access, provide data bundles to students who needed them for studying online, and hiring tutors to provide additional online support, negotiating with service providers for zero-rated data, extending wellness services for remote access by students, targeting vulnerable students for the phased return to residences, and providing care and isolation facilities for resident students who showed COVID-19 symptoms after returning on campus, and sourcing personal protective equipment, hand sanitizer distribution equipment, desk shields for staff who need them, poster and equipment across campus ahead of the phased return to campus. We have supported staff by providing private transport for colleagues who provided essential services on campus during the stricter lockdown levels, providing data allowances for staff to work remotely, extending UCT's counseling and mental health support services through iCares and organizational health services, and providing support for online learning, teaching, and data analytics through webinars and electronic materials, and extended licensing for library materials, among others. We have conducted reviews of campus buildings and rooms sourced apps to monitor the daily health of students and staff, and are incurring other costs to ensure the health and safety of people who are returning to campus. At the same time, we are continuing the work of the university as a place of teaching, learning, research, and discourse for new ideas. On the 22nd of September, we hosted a webinar to explore decolonization and decoloniality at UCT. We featured presentations by Associate Professor Shose Kesi, Professor Floretta Bonzayo, Professor Shadrach Chirukuri, and Dr. Lwazi Lushaba, who all received decolonization grants back in 2017. The discussion focused on decolonization in the context of UCT's Vision 2030. We've also had new staff joining us. Dr. Catherine Dugan took office as the new director of the UCT Graduate School of Business from the 1st of September 2020. And on the 1st of October, we welcomed Dr. Linda Matricia, who took office as Executive Director of Research at UCT, becoming the first Black African woman to be appointed to position of Executive Director in the history of the university. A special welcome to both Dr. Dugan and Dr. Matricia. We look forward to the contribution that you will make to UCT. We have hosted 2 virtual VC Open lectures during the lockdown, and as a result, we have reached people around the world, as well as in Cape Town. The first featured Colin Coleman, a senior fellow and lecturer at Yale University's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs. His talk focused on revitalizing the South African economy. The second lecture featured Professor Stephen Toop, the VC of Cambridge University, and his talk focused on global partnerships in higher education. Tomorrow, on the 14th of October, we will have a discussion or a lecture presented by Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations and Chair of the UN Sustainable Development Group, on how working towards the Global Sustainable Development Goals can help us to recover from the effects of COVID-19. Operations like these have continued during the lockdown, and it's all thanks to your hard work. It would be remiss of me not to comment on certain matters concerning the university that have been receiving extensive media attention recently, and which I am sure are causing concern for many of you. One of these matters is the commentary published by one of our academics in the South African Journal of Science and the complaint that was registered as a result. The executive has affirmed its respect for the academic rights of all at the university, and there is no exception in this case of the academic concerned with this article. The executive has also decided to refer the matter back to the academics' home faculty to attend to ensure that there is no perception of bias in the handling of this matter. The executive has agreed to remove itself from this process, and no one associated with the statement issued on the 5th of June will be involved in any process aimed at attending to the complaints received about the paper. The executive has faith in the integrity of the processes in place to deal with such matters, and we commit to accept the outcome, whatever it is. There's also been media attention around the controversy that has arisen over the publication of the recent Ombuds report. This has certainly been very damaging to us as a university. As you can appreciate, since I'm directly referred to in the report, it is inappropriate for me to comment publicly, especially because this is a council governance matter, and council is currently considering the issue. It is important, as tempting as it is important that I do not respond to any allegations in the media. This is in respect of the rule of law and good governance. At the same time, there have been reports in the media of divisions within the executive and the impact that this could have on the ability of the executive to act as a team and act in the best interest of the university. I know these reports would be very disturbing to anyone working at UCT. I would like to remind you as colleagues that robust debate in the executive is not only necessary, it is also inevitable. The university is, after all, a place of ideas, and this has been an intense learning period for all of us. But I can give you the assurance that we are each committed to serve the university to the best of our abilities. to put the interest of the university above any of our personal interests, and to always act professionally, respectfully, and with collegiality. And I can assure you that UCT is not in crisis. The leadership is focused on the sustainable success of the institution, because the institution will outlive any leader of the institution. Accountability and transparency are hallmarks of good governance, but to ensure the integrity of both, there also needs to be respect for the confidentiality of certain university processes and information about individuals. It does not matter how aggrieved we are about an individual within the university, but sharing private information that the university has about them is not only disrespectful, but it's also illegal. It is disconcerting, therefore, that so many of our confidential documents are leaked to the media and they continue to be used to harm the institution. This not only damages the university, it also undermines the very processes that they are meant to protect. At the beginning of this address, I reminded you of the shared responsibility we all have to help each other to remember to follow the safety principles that limit the spread of the COVID-19 virus. In a similar vein, it is just as important that we always try to act in the best long-term interests of the university and to the greater good, no matter how upset we are with each other or with the institution. The institution needs to outlive all of that. This is a commitment that I gave you when I took office. Together with the executive team, I have the honor to lead. I remain committed to safeguarding and advancing the academic project as tasked by Council with your confidence and assistance as fellow UCT colleagues. Let me end with what is hopefully a more uplifting note. In the most recent and widely respected Times Higher Education University rankings, UCT again was acknowledged as the top university on the African continent and the only university from our continent in the top 200 universities globally. University rankings are, of course, not consciously top priority for us as the leadership. Our story is much bigger than any ranking system can cover. That said, the rankings are not irrelevant to us. We understand that. They are not irrelevant to us. They are an acknowledgement of our excellence, our scholarship, and a testament to the talent and leadership that we have across the university. It is now my privilege to hand over to my colleagues in the executive who will tell you more about new developments within their respective portfolios. We will start with Dr. Reno Mora, our COO and chair of the COVID-19 Coordinating Committee. He will talk about the level 1 regulations instituted by government, risks and mitigating the risks. We'll talk about HR and finance matters. Thereafter, we'll have DVC Associate Professor Les Langen, and she will talk about teaching and learning and the impact of return to campus. Then we will have DVC Professor Sue Harrison, who will talk about research and postgraduate issues, and then DVC Professor Loretta Ferris on student support, return of students to residences, and anything that affects students. And then we will end with the registrar, Mr. Royston Pillay, on governance, 2020 exams, 2021 admissions, and 2021 academic year and graduations. After the presentations, we will have time to respond to questions. And I encourage you to send your questions to us now if you haven't already done so. Your questions can be submitted anonymously if you'd like to do so, and we will do our best to respond within the available time. Right now, I want to hand over to Dr. Reno Mora. Over to you, Reno.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor, for your introduction, and I just want to echo the sentiments that you expressed about colleagues and staff members in the room in helping us manage through what I have said many times are extraordinary times. I just want to remind colleagues in the room of the lockdown level 1 gazette that was published on the 18th of September 2020. It's an important gazette because it does provide the basis on which our policies and our practices are based, and to encourage all colleagues in the room at whatever level you are in the system to please be familiar not only with the regulations, but certainly with the communications that have come from the Vice-Chancellor, from my desk, and also from executive directors and deans. It's important that we're familiar with this communication because notwithstanding the feeling that lockdown level 1 is much lower and indeed different from lockdown level 5, the virus and the pandemic is still with us. And it's for that reason that the regulations encourage that staff who can work from home continue to do so. So remote work is still encouraged. We at UCT are still encouraging that. And that's because we are adopting an approach of work segmentation, where even today, if it is possible to work from home, please do so. It's also going to be the new normal when we come back. Probably my understanding is that lockdown level 1 will continue into 2021. But certainly when we're at lockdown level 0, we still feel that a work from home approach, a mixed approach, will be something that is still correct and true and encourages a new normal. For staff who are unable to work from home, where their job requires them to come to work, and that is a requirement for a large number of our staff, we certainly, with their presence on campus, want to encourage you to please make sure that you do the things that help not only protect yourself, but also colleagues who are on campus and certainly your families. And the Vice-Chancellor spoke about good practices in health and safety. So staff and colleagues to please continue to wear your masks, to physically and socially distant, whether it is at work or at home, and certainly to continue to wash your hands with soap or sanitize. Those principles and practices, I think if we all adhere to them, it will help us exercise a joint responsibility to make sure that we can come through this crisis. The second area I want to cover, and these are questions from staff in the room, and I thank you for forwarding your questions, is on the matter of our HR policies and practices. I do want to assure staff and reiterate that all our policies on leave, on sick leave, that were there before March 2020 remain in place. So staff are still encouraged to take their leave as they would normally do, whether you're working from home or from on campus. And certainly one particularly important aspect is staff who have comorbidities in the face of COVID must follow the normal HR policies and practices if staff are considered unfit to come to work, that they attend their nearest practitioner who would need to certify that they are indeed not well to return. And we will assist and manage via the Occupational Health Services in the Department of Properties and Services, as well as our HR colleagues, to make sure that staff are well and healthy and in a good physical and medical condition to return to work. It's important to know that thus far we've done about 4,800 personal health risk assessments to ensure that staff are well to return to work, and we'll continue to do so and address each case as it requires. We have now delegated the responsibility back to executive directors, deans, heads of department to better manage their staff as they return to work. And I think if we do this together, we'll ensure that all of us return safely. And if we do have medical conditions or medically vulnerable, that we'll manage them well. I do specifically want to speak about special considerations. The last time we had a meeting with the staff, people asked about whether the EduCare facility could be opened. We have indeed made the assessment and EduCare is currently functioning. We're phasing in the return of children, and as parents come more and more onto campus, so we're opening up, making sure that we fulfill health and safety protocols. I've received a number of questions around conferencing. The regulations that have been provided are an important framework for how we manage the question of conferencing. Certainly we are allowed smaller gatherings and certainly gatherings of under 250 people. We will shortly be publishing a framework that allows us to host small conferences and certainly conferences of between 50 to 60 people in venues that are COVID friendly, and certainly where health and safety protocols can be followed is certainly an opportunity for us to return to as far as we possibly can to normality and normalize the way we work. The last area I want to address is the issue of financial sustainability. We are blessed, and certainly I'm thankful to the executive management of the past and the current for managing the finances of the university in the way that they've done and the policy prescripts that have guided this executive. So we are in a steady financial situation right now. I do, however, need to indicate that 2020 will be a difficult year given that our income will be reduced, but our reserves that have been established by past executives and continue to be kept by the present executive will help us through the crisis. 2021 will be a crisis year in terms of financial sustainability and our budget. It is well known that the South African economy will be struggling, that government funding will be reduced. So the appeal from me and from the executive to you is that we continue to look and work hard to maintain our finances, to save costs, to also look after our resources, but at the same time, look after you as colleagues and as staff members. It is very clear that it's been a very stressful time for the majority of people at work. And clearly we would want to manage the university to ensure financial, social sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability. And the executive can only do that with you as colleagues in the room, whether you're in a management position or not. It doesn't really matter. We are in this together, and we need to continue to work steadily and strong to ensure the sustainability of the university. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing with you some of the experiences in the teaching and learning environment during this period. As you all know, we move into emergency remote teaching towards the end of the first term of the first semester. We declare officially the reopening of our teaching capabilities in relation to the second term as an online term. We extended that to the third term, and we are completing the year in remote teaching. It has been a difficult period, but as the colleagues before have stated, there is no doubt that the whole of the UCT community has raised to the occasion in unbelievable ways. The response from faculties has been extraordinary. The cooperation that we have received from students and the students' leadership in this period has also been very, very important. During this period, we learned a number of very important things. Soon enough, when we started the implementation of remote teaching, we realized that even if we provided data to students and if we provided devices, still we could not deal ourselves with the circumstances within which the students lived and were not always conducive for learning. So this made clear that one of the important tasks that we needed to take upon ourselves in order to make sure that online teaching was successful during this period was to take into account the situation of vulnerable students. So from the very beginning, we started planning the return of vulnerable students to residences in a collaborative work with the portfolio on transformation and student affairs. It is important to say that the underlying principle that informed this and that we have learned to apply in future is that the ability to learn, of having a conducive environment where to learn, is an absolute precondition for the success of online teaching in whichever variation we have it. So the other element which I think it is important to remark in terms of the manner in which we have managed the different needs of students' learning is that from the very beginning we planned the manner in which we were going to manage the academic calendar, taken into account those courses that could not be offered, or aspects of courses rather, that cannot be offered online, and those courses that needed presence in order to be taught. This involves students in the sciences, in the engineering and built environment, of course, students in the performative and creative arts, and of course our health science students are a particularly grouping within those. The return of students to campus because they need to be on campus for academic reasons has been quite complex and quite stressful, both for the faculties, the DSA, and the students themselves. But I'm very happy to report that the process has been basically finalized, that the students are on campus, and the latest reports I have received is that teaching is proceeding apace, and as a matter of fact, we received a very sweet note of thanks from some of the students in the hidden campus, being happy of having returned to their activities. The other element that I think we need to flag in terms of the progressive return of students to campus is the reopen of the library's services across all campus with different times for services, restricted services in terms of direct relationship with clients. And of course, the permanent offering of a virtual library services. So the libraries, we know that we have published the different opening and closing hours of the different libraries on campus. We have created a space for the students to study there. But of course, we need to restrict the number of students that can be on the library at a given time. The library has played a magnificent role in supporting the teaching and learning effort during this period. I think that when I look at the full package of what has happened in these months, I think that we have learned a great deal. We have learned a great deal about teaching and learning. We have learned a great deal about instructional design. We have learned about assessment. We have learned about our own creativity. Some departments have done extraordinary things to replace contact sessions with very creative ways of using the online space. But we have learned about the resilience of both our staff and our students during this period. So with all of these things that we learned, we are moving into 2021. As the Vice-Chancellor indicated, the fact that we are at lockdown level 1 does not mean that the risks are not there. And as you would read in the papers, there are second waves of infections all over the world. Some countries have again entered into lockdown, so we need to be vigilant. So currently we have submitted a proposal to Senate that is going to be discussed next week about continuing in an online mode during the first semester of 2021. How are we going to do this? We are still developing the models, but there are a number of principles which I think are important for us to understand. First of all, we are taking into account the size of the courses in which students are enrolled. So the first candidates for online teaching are those courses that have large numbers of enrollments. Secondly, we are very aware of the need to differentiate in terms of different students' needs and how those needs manifest themselves in terms of the level of the courses. So it is not the same situation, a course at the level 1000 or a course at the level 3000 or postgraduate students for that matter. So the general idea is to take into account these constraints together with the constraints in terms of what are the venues that we can use, and then is the issue of how to arrange the timetabling in such a way that we can make this thing work at the most efficient manner. The other principle that we are working on is that a strong tutorial support is an essential component of successful online education. And what is the best manner of providing this, depending on sizes and depending on the courses and depending on the availability of spaces, is the other element within which we are working. It is our hope that by mid-November, end November, we will have the number of models that are workable, that are implementable, and that we can share with the academic community and of course with parents and students themselves in order to understand how this works. I think it is important to know that in general, teaching remotely has been fairly successful at the university. We haven't had major failures. We are still studying and trying to analyze the sort of outcomes of learning from the students, and we are not yet in a position to say how well we have done. But the reality is that teaching and learning has met different demands from students, different learning styles, and the feedback that we get from students depends very much on how they themselves have felt in the different environments. I think that in general, there is a positive feeling amongst the students in terms of the care and attention that they receive from staff members. I hope that by the beginning of the new academic year in March next year, we will have a much more complete set of analysis of the outcomes of examinations, etc. And we will be able to provide the academic community with a deeper assessment of how well or not we did in this area. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor.
Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Katie. So on the research and postgraduate side, just like everywhere else in the university, 2020 has been a difficult year, but with some unexpected gems. The impact on both research and postgrad has been varied, with disruption to lives, research and postgrad studies. And it's had its good and bad. Probably most notably, the time requirements for emergency remote teaching have hit heavily on the research activities of many of our academics. And yet for others, there's been dedicated time and focused time to work on research for those who are not in the teaching space and who have been locked down. And this has brought some quite different insights into work for them. There have been risks, many risks associated with research, risks around research funding, risks around research deliveries, around how we do field work, particularly when it's on a time basis with the seasons or such like, and how we handle aspects of the lab and studio, particularly labs which have living organisms in them. And so this has really led to us needing to rethink core aspects of the sustainability of our operation. I'm going to start talking in the research in the postgrad space, and as Liz has mentioned around the undergrad space, we moved postgrad courses online fairly swiftly in the same kind of way as we did with the undergrad space, and much of what Liz has said refers to this. I'd like to acknowledge again the libraries. It's great to have the partial openings of the library come now, but the virtual facility which they have set up has really been a mainstay of many of our researchers, and they've really gone to great lengths to achieve this. and so have the ICTS in providing high-speed computing facilities and SILT and CAS, and so we can go on. And so the postgrads have been disturbed again, just like in the undergrad space, depending quite a lot on what their lockdown environment was like. We've done a number of things to work through the delay in postgrad research, and one of the most important ones is that we pushed out the deadlines for submission of theses for the research students. At which one would get a fee waiver. So the fee waiver dates have gone out by 8 weeks this year, with the for technical registration, and therefore not having to pay 2021 fees will be at the beginning of term as it normally is, except the term will start later, and so that will also give some relief. So the other thing that we've done with respect to the postgrad delays is that we've put in place in a slightly different way for the honours and for the masters and PhDs, but they both are effectively give the opportunity to motivate for a 6-month period of no fees, of a fee waiver, and this will be at the end of the degree. The process for putting this in, for requesting this, it must be motivated by both the student and the supervisor, has been communicated by the faculty officers and is also being communicated through the postgrad communications hub. I note a question on it, and so we'll make sure that that is communicated again. So obviously, as soon as we could, we needed to look at return to research, returning students and researchers to both their laboratories and their studios. And as I think we've found throughout the world, this has been harder than expected. Actually, our experience has been very much the same as what is has been experienced in many universities around the world, and I've been quite intrigued in webinars with our network universities just how similar our experience has been. So we started looking at the return to, we started moving to return to research as the lockdown levels lifted, and have been working on this since late May. With the first people getting back to campus in the middle of July. It became obvious that it was necessary to for the big picture to be looked at from the centre, and this is the same as recognised around the world, so a lot of decisions needed to be centralised. But the operational matters needed to be, such as the standard operating procedures and the risks and so on, needed to be as close to the action as possible, and so that's where departments and faculties and research groups really needed to be able to come to the party. And that's more or less how we did it. We started our cautious return with the first people returning in July, with permissions being given from the centre and processes having to be rolled right through from faculty to department to research lab or research studio. And by the end of, by September, we had 1,500 staff involved with research, 2,500 postgrad students involved in research back on campus. And during September, we've brought back all the honours students who need labs to finish their honours process. And this is very much in line with the academic calendar that we laid out earlier in the lockdown period. And it allows us to finish for the honours projects to be completed before year end. So I'd like also just to acknowledge here that I've worked with quite a dedicated team who have been thinking deeply about the risks that we need to take and the need to get research back on track. And this is the Return to Research Task Team. Who've really helped us to think through this in all the different corners of the university. And similarly, we've had a postgrad task team who've worked in the same kind of a way. Very delighted that we've managed to shift the delegation of authorities into the faculties with respect to staff return, with respect to many aspects of research support. This really does make things work much, much smoother. I think one of the key messages is that we will be working as hard as possible to keep our research going and uninterrupted, even though we may have further waves of infection. And for this, it's really, really important for our researchers or for our university community to maintain the standard operating practices which have been put in place for every lab or studio, and to really pay great attention to them. We're working in these areas with mostly with shifts, and so we have a very low occupancy of the labs and studios, and yet the amount of research which needs to be done, I understand, is being done. We've also put in place guidelines around fieldwork, not to restrict what happens, but to help us each think through how best to keep the work and the people doing it safe. There will still be many logistics that we'll need to work through as more and more people return to campus. Really keeping our processes, our good processes in place is going to be absolutely key moving forward. So I think at this point it's worth recognizing that there have been both benefits and challenges of this year. And some of the benefits have been the different positioning we have on the international stage, because we are no further removed from many international communities than anybody else is. We're all on the same Teams or Zoom, and this has really given us an evening up of our research landscape. And Hetty spoke earlier about the many events that we've had, and so one example of that is the webinar series that our Vice-Chancellor hosted around internationalization and how the global university will change into the future, looking at how it impacts research, postgrad and undergraduate matters. And we want to hold on to items like this as we return to whatever our new normal might be. But there have also been lots and lots of challenges, and probably one of the big ones is around the research finances, and we are looking at this in terms of how we see contracts happening, how we see cost recovery happening, and we're seeing very much that these are holding their space at the moment in financial value, but our contract number is down, and so we do expect that we might have a more difficult part coming ahead. UCT has written grants like the wind this year. Huge numbers of grants are being processed through our grant writing offices and the ERA system. We have no lead indicator to see how we'll be doing on research outputs, so that is still something which we'll have to wait and see. I think one of the real things to celebrate about UCT over this time has been our research agility and the way we've managed to pivot research amazingly, and the proud contribution we've made to COVID research. I've held several events around this during the course of the year, and it's fascinating to see our contribution to COVID research in the medical space, in communication, in education, in economic matters, in engineering and hardware, in modelling the pandemic, and so on. I think that's really exciting. I think one of the other things which has been really exciting for our work over this year has been the working across portfolios, the need for Liz and Loretta and Reno and I as that level of management to really work across portfolios, because everything is interacting with everything else. We've got lots of new approaches that we want to move forward on, and we've tried not to stop during this year. Aspects around, for instance, our sustainable campus call, aspects around thinking about our the best models for our postgrad degrees, aspects about thinking about how we work in a very focused way on our research, how we integrate social responsiveness and how we integrate interdisciplinarity. And so I think it remains an exciting space. That said, I fully understand the frustration which has come through having our research and our postgrad activities slowed down this year. And as we walk forward to getting this all up to full speed, I would like to say it's very much an open invitation. If there are issues which are worrying our academics on campus, please do put them onto the agenda of the Return to Research Task Team or the Postgrad Task Team through your deputy deans, and we will work as hard as we can to resolve them as quickly as possible. With that, thank you very much.
So, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm going to just talk briefly, I hope, on where we are with students' return to residence, and then how we supported them during lockdown, and how we are currently managing the situation in the residence given the spread of the virus or the anticipated spread of the virus. So of course, you'll know that we have prioritized students that are vulnerable during lockdown. In other words, those students for whom remote emergency learning turned out to be quite difficult given their own personal circumstances. But also at the same time, we knew that especially during lockdown levels 4 and 3, we could only give bed space to a very few students. And so we then had this approach of scoring vulnerability. And we gave students a vulnerability score based on a number or a set of criteria. And that is in essence how we made the decision on whom to return first to residence. So we had different cohorts of students that we wanted to return. We started with the vulnerable students. We then prioritized students who needed access to labs and to studios in order to complete their research or to complete their academic year. So this applied to both postgrad students and undergrad students. And then there were smaller cohorts of students who we returned students who were left kind of destitute international students. After lockdown, we also returned some of our students with disabilities. And then we also returned students who reached out to the OIC as a result of them falling victim to sexual and gender-based violence during lockdown. So as of last week, we have around just over 2,900 students back in residence. So that includes the students who remained in residence, around 250. And then those students who have, since the lockdown levels were relaxed, who have returned to residence. I also just want to note that there are about 2,200 students whom we invited for return, but who actually declined. So that gives us an indication that some students do not feel that it is safe necessarily to return to residence, and they do opt to rather remain at home. And so we have around 2,900 in res, and we've issued, there are another 2,000 to whom we've issued invitations and who confirmed that they will in fact return. So we will have around 5,000 students in res, which is what we can. The number that we can safely house. And when I talk about safely, one of the decisions that we made is, while a number of our residences, in fact, I would say the bulk of our residences are double rooms, we've decided to not use double spaces. In other words, we only allocate one student per room. And that's, of course, in order to maintain social distancing and ensure that we can have a handle on the spread of the virus itself. So that's where we are in terms of student numbers, students that are back. I thought it's also useful to talk a little bit about how we supported students during during lockdown, whilst they were outside of residence. In other words, those students who would have been in residence but had to vacate. So normally students who are in residence benefit from psychosocial support and academic support, and that's provided through Res Life and the Res Life team. And so when students returned home, we had to reconceptualize the manner in which students were supported. But we were able to provide or to think about innovative ways to support students. And I'll just give you some ideas of how students have been supported. The residence tutor system, which is a system that normally prevails in residence, were activated in an online format. And with that, we also provided the mentoring system, which is not quite the same. The tutoring system looks at academic support, and the mentoring system looks at much more sort of psychosocial support. And so a number of students signed up for online mentoring and tutoring services. And of course, for the Rest Live team, they need to know how many students are actually utilizing this and how they're utilizing this. So we also devised an online tutor and mentor tracking system to track on a weekly basis the quantity of time and the consultations that were held with mentees and tutees. And this is quite important data that we will review. And especially to get a sense of equity and access across the resident sector. And then for the mentors and tutors, we developed a coaching circle, which allowed them to get coaching support so that they can go through exercises of self-reflection, but also to enable them to have answers to some of the questions that they may have. And the focus was really on ensuring their resilience as student mentors, as student tutors. And then we also piloted an online study buddy approach, and that was to sort of support students, and they can support each other, and looked at, the ability for them to set goals and keeping themselves and holding each other accountable. Similarly, in order to support postgrad students, we introduced a writing buddy online system as well. And that is recognizing that postgrad students also needed support during the time, and that they also may benefit and find value from an increased connection to their postgraduate peers. Frontline workers, they work throughout this period. They, as soon as we started seeing the first positive cases came in, they stepped in and they stepped out, providing support for those who have tested positive in All Africa House. And then with the return of students, there was a need, of course, to adhere to certain protocols, including screening of students as they arrive at residences, and also ensuring that they comply with self-quarantine and self-quarantine rules. So I was making the point that student wellness provided some vital services during this time, ensuring that they offered services, of course, online, in particular mental health support for students, and then overseeing health and safety protocols for the return of students, ensuring screening before they're allocated to rooms, and overseeing the self-quarantine period that every student who returns has to undergo before they can actually move around freely. And then students and staff who are on campus or sort of who live on campus and who are COVID-19 positive are provided medical care and treated in the isolation facility at All Africa House. And for that, Student Wellness has a COVID-19 response team. Now, I've seen a question around student behavior, and one of the things that we've done is we developed disciplinary rules that adhere to the environment and the circumstances that we are in. And the rules are much more stricter than they would normally have been. So, for example, currently students are not allowed to have overnight visitors. In fact, they're not allowed to have visitors, and that includes overnight visitors. I can certainly tell staff that we see quite a lot of pushback in this rules. And recently we started having a conversation about the extent to which there needs to be self-responsibility in the student cohort as well. And so we are concerned that students may not be adhering to the rules as they return to campus, and we we are trying very hard to ensure that they adhere to social distancing, because we know that some universities in the US and UK were forced to close as a result of a surge in cases. So we are monitoring the situation quite closely, and will continue to certainly to enforce the rules where necessary. And this falls within the Royston's area, and I'm sure he'll comment on this as well. Katie, I'll stop here for now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Loretta. Royston, can we hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to make some comments about issues of governance, issues of the exams for 2020, graduation, the academic year for 2021, and student admissions in 2021. And there are a number of questions that have come through on the chat line, and I'll try and respond to those in terms of what I'm going to say now as well. But in broad overview, from a governance point of view, so notwithstanding the extraordinary and the unprecedented circumstances that we have faced and we continue to face, the regular governance prescripts still apply. So the requirements of the Higher Education Act, the Institutional Statute, and the Council policies still apply in how the affairs of the university, how those affairs are conducted. So I can certainly confirm that the statutory committees are functioning. Council has been functioning, Council has been meeting. In fact, there is a plenary regular meeting of Council scheduled for the 17th of October. Senate has met in online space. The Senate Executive Committee has been very active, and so too the IF. And another statutory body, which is the Convocation, its AGM is scheduled to meet in December 2020. So from a governance point of view, that is on a good wicket. It's stable, and we've been applying those prescripts as required by legislation, but also as required by our council policy. With regard to exams in 2020, so as our colleagues have mentioned, the academic program for 2020 has continued. This, of course, has not been without huge effort, without resilience, and without fortitude, and credit to staff and students for the role that they have played and continue to play in this regard. The assessment mechanisms have been adjusted as necessary under the circumstances, and most of the exams in semester 2, current semester, as was the case in semester 1, will be via the online mode. Only a small number of courses will have invigilated exams in campus venues, and where these courses require, and this happens particularly where the affected courses require computer labs for the exams, or the professional requirements associated with a particular qualification requires a regular invigilated exam. In taking these exams on campus, a range of precautions will be heeded, and arrangements have been made and will be made insofar as they have not already been put in place via our exams office and via our properties and services department for exam preparation as required. Sanitization requirements, PPE protocols will be applied, and our campus protection services will ensure that only students who have been registered for particular exams will gain access to the campus venue on the day of the exam concern. So that will be tightly monitored and tightly controlled. As I said, venues will be sanitized, and they will be demarcated appropriately for purposes of the physical distancing requirements. Contact tracing arrangements will be in place based on exam registers, and these obviously will apply in the event of a suspected or confirmed COVID infection. But the contact tracing facility will certainly be in place. The semester 2 exam block will end much later than would normally be the case, which is completely understandable given our circumstances. So that exam block in semester 2 will end on the 9th of December this year. The provisional results will be on the system by the 23rd of December. The faculty exams committees will approve these results by mid-January 2021, and supplementary exams are scheduled for the last week of January 2021. So our academic year, strictly speaking, in the main, will conclude in 2020, but there will be a little bit of overflow to the 2021 year. With respect to graduation, now regular graduation ceremonies are not going to be possible for reasons of responsible health precautions that we are required to be mindful of and required to take. We have to plan on the basis of information as it currently stands. And this means that closed venue events of no more than 250 persons, health precautions in times of ongoing uncertainty, which makes it really challenging, and of course the concerns about the secondary wave of infections. All of that needs to be taken into account with respect to what we're going to do with as far as the graduation arrangements are concerned. But it is not going to be possible to run the regular grad ceremonies that we would normally do. The detail of the graduation arrangements will be communicated shortly, but it will be based on the virtual event model. With respect to the 2021 academic year, matric results for 2020 for the cohort in matric in 2020. Those results will be released by the Department of Basic Education on the 23rd of February next year. In terms of our planning and in terms of the academic calendar and the year plan for 2021, we have lectures commencing on the 15th of March next year. And for returning students at the more senior level and at the postgrad level, it will be possible to start a number of those courses earlier through arrangements that conveners will make with the students concerned. It is an obvious point that the period between the release of the matric results on the 23rd of February and the start of lectures on the 15th of March will be an intense one. Out-of-town students will have to travel to Cape Town at relatively short notice once they've had a confirmation of their study offer. Orientation is going to be, student orientation is going to be very important given the circumstances. And of course, the program registration will need to take place in record time within what is going to be a very, very packed 3 weeks. But it is mitigated somewhat by the fact that much of the registrations for students who are returning postgrad, students who are not first time entering, that we actually have a longer period of time at the start of the year before the matric results are released to actually deal with those registrations. So that's a bit of a mitigation and an opportunity that I think we must take advantage of. Now, any start to the 2021 year that is going to be later than the 15th of March is not a good idea. It will seriously compromise our ability to conclude the 2021 academic year in 2021. And we have to try as hard as possible to achieve the completion of 2021 in 2021 rather than a spillover into 2022. And if we work according to the year plan that has been developed and that does enjoy the status of a Senate year plan, is that we will still be able to retain the required 60 teaching days per semester. Very, very important for our academic core business. We will have a mid-year VAC. It will be reduced, though, in terms of its period. And exams in 2021 are scheduled for completion in November 2021. With respect to admissions in 2021, we have seen really, really interesting, pleasing in many respects, a little bit anxiety-provoking in others, and I'll explain why in a minute. But if we survey what our trend lines are looking like, and more than just trend lines, given that at undergrad level the application deadline has passed, the applicant numbers for both undergraduate programs as well as postgraduate programs are up in comparison to last year. In fact, at the undergraduate first-time entry level, it is significantly up against the equivalent numbers for last year. And it's up by, when last I looked at the stats very recently, by a factor of 40%, 40. And with respect, we've seen an increase in applicant rates on the postgrad side as well. At the moment, it's about 8% up on last year. And very interestingly, we've also seen more than doubling in terms of applications on the part of transferring applicants. And I think that is very interesting because all of this together points to the fact that UCT continues to enjoy huge prominence in the minds, and I'm sure in the hearts as well, of an applicant community, with this institution being increasingly and on an ongoing basis a study destination of choice. The little bit of concern we have, though, is that we obviously are going to have to find the balance between the number of offers we make in relation to our enrollment targets in order that we achieve the planned take-up on those offers. And we're going to have to do this and do everything we can to avoid two things. On the one hand, it's an under-enrollment, which is not a good space to be in, but at the same time, a significant over-enrollment because of what that would mean in terms of managing on the basis of huge numbers. It's not going to be easy, particularly given that the regular patterns that would normally inform our take-up predictions have been significantly impacted by to the extent that they have, given what we have experienced in 2020. So in conclusion, colleagues, we live and work in different times and difficult times. The challenges are significant, but there are opportunities that are many. And from my side, just to add my thanks as well to everybody, to all the staff, we are confident we'll continue to support the university in its ongoing efforts to be the best we can be for the multiple communities and stakeholders that we serve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just make a point about one further point, and it's responding to a query that came up in the chat line, and this is with regard to students breaking the health protocols and requirements in the residences. Loretta has made reference to this. It's an important issue. We are confident and we know that the overwhelming majority of students who have returned are acting in a responsible way, and we thank them for that. And we thank the colleagues from Student Services, the wardens, who are playing a very, very important role there. There are, however, instances and incidences of individual students who are not exercising the levels of responsibility that all of us require them to exercise, because it's in the interest of our safety, the safety of our students, and health considerations. There are rules that are in place through which this infraction of the rules can be regulated and can be dealt with. There's an overriding rule that requires all students to heed a reasonable instruction from an officer of the university, and within the student housing context that would include a warden. There are rules that are COVID related that are in place through government gazettes, together with our own rules regime council approved, that regulate the conduct of students. And where we have individual cases of ongoing and repeat infraction of those rules, particularly where it compromises the health safety of others, we are able to deal with that through the University Student Disciplinary Tribunal, and those cases must be reported through the channels that exist for that purpose.
Thank you very much, Royston. I'm going to ask Reno to kick off. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We've got lots of questions, a lot of questions that are very relevant. Reno, I'm going to ask you to respond to two questions. I'm just grouping them. So the first one is colleagues who are asking about the university closing between the 28th of December and the 8th of January. The second question that I want you to address is colleagues who are saying we can work at home. We've been efficient working at home. My line manager wants me to come back. Are we going to go? What's the plan going to the future? Are we going to be forced to come back? Can we continue working at home? What does the future look like in terms of working from home? Reno?
Thanks, Mamokgethi. On the issue of working from home, I do want to just say, and it's also a response to another question where we need our managers and our leaders as a group to assist us to develop a new way of working. So surely where we are successful to work from home and where there are individual cases where staff are asking to work from home, I think we should really be implementing the new normal now. And so my message to managers, supervisors, and the staff is let's implement the new normal now and continue with it through 2021. It is a new way of working. So Mamokgethi, I mean, as an executive, certainly we are considering different ways and considering the end of the year. We have not as yet made a decision about how we want to address the end of the year, given that the academic calendar year is also extended to March. But certainly it would be important for us, like we've done in the past as an executive, to be able to take a proposal through to council that looks at how we deal with the end of the year, December, January, or depending when the academic year ends, the calendar year ends in March, April. So we have not as yet have a definitive position on closure at the end of the year. But we well recognize that the staff have been under significant pressure during the course of this year, and we need to take account of the requests that have come through. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Reno. Lisa, I'll come to you again with 2 questions before I go back to Reno. Many of the questions are HR related, so I'll go back to Reno. But I just wanted you to address the question about safe distancing requirement when students return to campus, whether there's provision for live streaming solution in some of the lecture halls. And then there's a question about curriculum being eased in 2021. What are the plans there? Are we planning to ease up the curriculum? There's a concern that there's a lack of research activities due to increased workloads. I want to take the third one because I think it's similar. I'll throw in this one that's very personal. When are we supposed to return our books to the library, the ones that we took before the lockdown? Over to you, Les.
Thank you, Hetty. Thank you for the questions, colleagues. Let me start with the personal one. I assume that the librarians, being pragmatic people, would have realized that they need to extend the dates of all those loans. And this is not the moment to be returning your books to the library. So keep them for a bit longer. And I'm sure that the librarians will be quite happy as far as you return them. That's number one. In relation to the lighting up of the curriculum, I hope that we are not going to light up the curriculum. I hope that what we are going to do is to go to some level of normality in which our lives are not just going to be about planning to teach and then teaching and then assessing. So we have learned many things, and I hope that during 2021 we are going to be able to rebalance the lives of academics in such a way that the research enterprise is not unduly undermined. So I can see Professor Harrison already is sort of nodding affirmatively and enthusiastically about this. But I mean, I think that everybody realizes the impact that this has had. So that's our hope. One of the things that I think that we all need to understand is that when one works in converting, in preparing online lectures, the input in time is phenomenal at the beginning. But once that is done, the work is done. So next year, although we will have to make some rearrangements and improvements, should not be as demanding as it has been up to now. That's in relation to that. In relation to the manner in which we are going to manage the return to campus, we are trying to avoid having lectures in venues, streamed or otherwise. So for large classes, as I indicated in my input, we are looking at online lectures, and we are looking at tutorials possibly being conducted face-to-face in smaller venues and smaller groups. So we are avoiding at all costs large concentrations of people, and also remember the majority of venues at UCT are not particularly conducive for the kind of work that we need to do. So that's the plan that we have, and as I said, I hope towards the end of November we should be able to present to the academic community a full plan of how this thing is going to be done. I think that I didn't leave anything out, eh?
Yeah, cool. I'm gonna rush. We scheduled to end at 1. So Reno, here's a group of questions. So are we ready for the second wave whenever it appears? Are we ready just in case there's an outbreak of the pandemic on campus? And thirdly, how do we protect people? There's particularly with students who stay at home, maybe they want to come to campus to the library, or staff who come from home travel to. So there's a concern that what if they, because of their trips, we're not able necessarily to contain the virus. So just respond to those. I've just rephrased them, but the concerns are around that.
Thanks, Mamokgethi. In response to the second wave and outbreaks, we have set up a rapid response task team, and heads of departments, deans are able to contact the individuals led by Associate Professor David Kutsia and a team that will provide advice about how we deal with outbreaks. Certainly in terms of the second wave, my information is that it will be slightly different and certainly not to the extent to which the first wave came, but we will continue to monitor it very closely and are ready to respond as and when it comes and in what form. Clearly, the ideas of physical distancing, wearing of masks, washing of hands, and really being responsible and making sure that we all do that is one way of managing the infection. We won't be able to prevent the second wave, but we certainly can manage the way the infection is done. And I'm confident that colleagues in the room will work with us in order to do that. And I just wanted to just speak about the risks. So obviously traveling on public transport, remember the community infection rates have been very high relative to the infection rates on the university side. And therefore we are able to see the UCT environment actually as a safer one relative to the community environment. So I think we just need to understand the risks that our communities have faced in respect of the pandemic. I think we're in a better place now than what we were in March.
Thanks, Reno. Rustin, can I ask the question about returnees? There's a concern about we don't necessarily have registration online. How is this going to be managed with returning students? And one small one about final year results. When will this be visible to students? And then the third one is about students who don't observe the rules in residences. What are the consequences there?
Yeah, so it is the case that not all students will be able to register online for their programs. We're not at the level of the rules-based registration facility that we started working on and has been introduced through pilot programs that started in 1 or 2 faculties 2 years ago. We will have every faculty have some programs that will be covered in terms of the rules-based registration, given the significant setup work that this requires. And to cover the balance, we will then have to do that through a slower form of what we refer to as remote registration, but that will involve students filling out forms online, and there will have to be a back-end data capturing exercise. It's not ideal, but it's what we may have to consider as an option where for those programs that are not yet set up for full-on rules-based registration. It is the case that for very many of the programs, honours programs, postgrad diplomas, where there are single course code registrations that apply for those programs, where we can in fact register through a rules-based facility. So that will take care of many of the postgrad diplomas and the honours students in a way that happened last year. And we will also build on what the science faculty achieved 2 years in a row now, and that is to do their research masters and doctoral student registrations through an online MOU, which then enables online registration. That is being rolled out to all of the faculties for next year. So we are on track in that regard. There may be 1 or 2 sticky points, but we are in a lot better a position for 2021 in terms of the postgrad research students. Then, with regard to the infraction of the rules, I'll make mention again of the point that I made earlier on. We do have a rules regime. We can apply it, and we have been running the student tribunal online and actually been dealing with a number of cases through an online tribunal facility. So in cases where we have particularly serious infractions of those rules or repeat offenders of the same kind of issue, we can actually deal with that, and we will. We just need to have those reported through the regular channels. Well, the provisional results for this year will be available at, I think I said it was on the 9th of December, and the FECs will then sit and the final results on the 23rd of December.
Thanks, Royston. Loretta, I'm not sure if you're still online. I just want us to clear the question about when postgraduate students are going to be allowed to return to residence, but also the idea of day students, the fact that, you know, students come onto campus by invitation, whether they go to rest or not, it's all by invitation. Can you clear that up for us?
Thanks, Katie. So on the issue of postgrad students, many postgraduate students are already in the residence. They were treated in the same way as undergraduate students. So postgraduate students who were considered vulnerable are back in residence. Postgrad students who needed to be back to complete their academic year, their research, they are back in residence. And so for 2021, it will be on the basis of whether they do have a residence room. And once the academic year starts, all students will return to residence. So there's not going to be a different kind of scenario for postgraduate students. They will in 2021, they will come at the start of the academic year. On the issue of day students, I think it's very important that we emphasize that the invite to students to return to residence is to return to residence only. It is for them to complete their academic year under conditions where they have access to Wi-Fi, where they have support from student wellness, etc., etc. It is not for them to walk around freely on campus. So day students will continue to work online as they have been up until now.
Thanks, Loretta. Reno, I want to end with you. I mean, I know that we won't be able to answer all the questions, and just to say to colleagues, we're going to take the questions and we'll find a way of giving responses to you. But there's two questions that I think we can close on. One is about colleagues who are asking about their. Okay, three. One is about, are we going to get a refund for our paying for our parking tickets, our parking desks? The second one is, when is the cleaning staff coming back onto campus? We need some cleaning in our offices. The third one is, are sporting facilities open? Sounds very personal, but colleagues want to know. Reno, can we close on that?
So on the sporting facilities, actually, that's I would pass that one on to Loretta, given the DSA purview over that. But Mamokgethi, in principle, we want to normalize as soon as possible. But the issues of social distancing, contact sport, and all of those sort of things are something that we will need to consider. We haven't yet issued a ruling of returning sporting facilities, and certainly I will take that up with the COVID coordinating committee and deal with that. As far as returning properties and services staff is concerned, we are returning them in a phased way, and I'm not particularly sure what this specific area is talking about, but there is no doubt that through the Properties and Services Department that reports through to me, we are returning colleagues in a very specific way, and that is also dependent on staff being healthy to return. But we're managing that, so maybe if there are any specific areas, I can deal with that. On the issue of parking refund, as you know, we have been dealing with that depending on how the calendar year has been extended. So for staff, we have been issuing, it depends on the approach and what people are looking for. We have been issuing refunds on a case-by-case basis because some people may be back early next year depending on when our calendar year continues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Reno. Royston, your last word, you have an urgent thing to share?
Just to clarify on the issue of the exams results release, VC. So the semester 2 exams will be concluded by the 9th of December this year. The provisional results will be on the system by the 23rd of December. And the faculty exams committees will confirm those provisional results by mid-January 2021. So those are the key dates as far as the exam results are concerned. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Royston. Thank you, colleagues, Royston, Reno, Sue, Loretta, and Les. Thank you very much for the informative presentations today. But more than the presentations, I have to say thank you for the work. Colleagues in the questions that they've been asking have been saying, we hope the executive management also goes back to work. And I want to make colleagues in the university aware that, in fact, the executive has been working so hard. I feel guilty that all of them need leave because it's been really a tough time, and I really appreciate your collegiality, the hard work that you've put in at this time. But I also thank every colleague who submitted a question for this discussion. As I mentioned earlier, UCT's work is the result not just of these leaders, but of the many colleagues on different teams who continue to serve the university during the unique circumstances provided by COVID-19. So heads of departments, EDs, managers at different levels, we really, really appreciate the work that you have been doing with us to make sure that we go through this year of COVID-19 successful as a university. Let me remind all of you colleagues about nominations for the VC's Excellence Award for 2020. The closing date is on Thursday, the 15th of October, just the day after tomorrow. And we encourage all of you past staff members to apply or nominate colleagues for the Global Citizenship Award and the Service Excellence Award, whilst all staff involved in transformation work are invited to apply or nominate colleagues for the UCT Transformation Award. These are prestigious awards, and it's important that you either nominate yourself or nominate a colleague or a team of colleagues that you believe have done an excellent job to deserve this award. These awards aim at recognizing members of the UCT community who make an outstanding contribution to the university's mission and objectives through innovation or improvement in services and sustained exceptional performance in an area or areas beneficial to the university and its strategic imperatives. So let's recognize them. Let me end this assembly by thanking all of you for attending. More importantly, let me thank the brilliant Communications and Marketing Department, the super team at CMD, which organized and managed this online assembly. COVID-19 looks like it will be with us for some time, but that does not mean we cannot stay strong as a community. Through the challenges, we should stay strong, together, focused on ensuring sustainable success for the university. Meetings like this help us to stay together, even when we have to stay apart because of the pandemic. So please stay well, keep safe, and help each other to do so. Have a good day. Thank you very much for attending.